Hey, greetings everybody. This is Wesley Pepper. This is the Art and Lexcia podcast. This is actually episode 104. It sounds like 1,000 years ago since I started it. And whenever I look at the amount of episodes, like, oh my God, really? Yeah, man, as you can see, Siza is still not with us today, but I know she's around. She will definitely be with us in the next episode, that's for sure. And yeah, last episode we spoke to Kimberly Anderson. I really enjoyed that there. There were some technical issues with the recording, but I'm sure you guys, I'm sure Julius would have worked that out. But yeah, that was very good. My sister, thanks for coming through. That was a lot of fun. Remember to always, I gotta prompt you, like, subscribe, comment to the channel. It's on YouTube. Our primary channel is on YouTube, but yeah, we're all over. I haven't already been uploading any of the Ep3s yet. That's a technical thing, because if you guys are based in South Africa, you know that the load shedding schedule has really crippled everything, and my rhythm is not there. I have been starting to work a bit on new artwork, but it's only recently, as in like last week recently. It took me a while to get my rhythm back. But yeah, man, it is what it is. We're trying to make the best of the situation. And remember also, but I'll be telling you guys with this via social media and stuff, like the project with Asal Ibulan from Austin and Poetry Tuesdays, to say that. Those are two really cool separate series that we're working on. So yeah, as much as things are starting a bit start now, you know, we're definitely going to be picking up as the year goes, because I'm getting a generator also pretty soon. And once that is done, then Escom, then finally I'm kind of off the grid. Not really, but anyway. So yeah, we're just dealing with all of those things right now. And yeah, just the last point before I bring in my guest. Like I said, I have been working on new art, so that's fantastic. So look forward to that. I'll definitely be sharing that, because Yebo, the gallery, they're doing some pretty cool stuff. We've got some pretty cool stuff lined up for 2023, and I'll definitely be telling you guys about that in the coming week. So that's it regarding the monologue. So I've a very cool guest today, Eugene Ulman from Joburg, right? Yeah. Well, from South Africa, we'll just say South Africa. He's a well-traveled fella and a photographer. Been following his photography a lot on Facebook. Really, really cool stuff. And over the past few months, I know he's been in Egypt. He's doing some really cool stuff there. I'm going to be talking about a little about his processes, a little photography of some of his travels and projects and so forth. And yes, my brother, it's what's the time now? It's just 10:30 on what's today, Tuesday. How are you doing?
Wesley, I'm doing great. Thanks very much for having me. I'm very happy to be back in Johannesburg. Really excited. Yeah, I've been away for a few months, and yes,
yeah, you see, you doing
the vibe here is good.
Yeah. So I always find it so interesting when guys have been outside of the country for long, they're always happy to be back, and us who've been here for so long, like, fuck. Yeah, South Africa.
Well,
yeah, sorry.
I just know, it's just, I've been in Cairo for the last 2 months or so, and I think Cairo is the only place in the world that you can then come back to Joburg and go, wow, Joburg is so slow and relaxed and chilled.
Yeah, that says a lot. That says quite a bit. So actually, let's jump into that, man. Like I said in the monologue, like, I've been following a bit of your photography. We do a lot of stuff in color, and I've noticed you focus a lot on portraits and architecture. Yeah, let's start right in the beginning. So yeah, are you what's the word? If you you know, as creators, always weird, like, to ask this, but like, are you a photographer? Because I know guys do everything these days, but what is the primary? I don't even know what the word is. Your main thing is.
Yeah, no, I think I understand. I think I get the question. Look, the thing is with photography, it's one of those things that, you know, I think these days, you know, almost anyone with a mobile phone can be a photographer. So I think it's more like you're a photographer if other people think you're a photographer. I think that's kind of To me, that's sort of, you know, I never thought of myself as a photographer because I'm not. It's something that I've only really started thinking about recently. My work background is filmmaking, documentary filmmaking.
Sure.
So I always thought about images, but for me, for a long time, I didn't think about still photography too much. It was just something that I did, you know, like anyone else, just to remember friends and places and memories and so on. And then when I started this current film that I'm making in Johannesburg, this documentary, and I started it before COVID. Yeah. It got interrupted by COVID. When I started making that film before COVID, I was collaborating with quite a few photographers in Johannesburg, street photographers, going out on shoots with them. You know, the film that I'm making is about Johannesburg. So shooting with photographers was one way of getting to know the city better. And in that process, I learned from them and started thinking more about still images, started thinking more about photography. I started doing more photography kind of as an exercise before I come and shoot video to sort of understand a place or a location better. And, you know, after a little while, people started liking the photos and I started getting good feedback, you know, and a few photos even got published and I was invited to be part of an exhibition, and that all happened very recently. So it's just made me think more about photography and enjoy it more. And as I said, I was just in Cairo for a couple of months, and I was researching for a film project, but I wasn't filming anything. So I just treated street photography almost like a daily practice and just went out every day and did it for a few hours. And I'm waiting to see if it's going to influence how I film it all. I'm not sure yet, but we'll know over the next couple of months.
It sounds really interesting, man. And I want to liken it to writing poetry. Most writers regard poetry as the bedrock of writing. So for you to become a very skilled writer, you need to be you need to write good poetry. Do you think that the same can be said as a filmmaker in order to, for example, to analyze or to do composition? At least I'm thinking like a visual artist. Yeah. Do you think street art or street photography or this photography sharpens the eye? It sharpens the skills. Is that accurate?
I hope so. But no, I think seriously, I think so. I think that you know, a lot of people that I encounter who make films or make pictures, make images, they tend to think a lot about the equipment they use and the technology of it all and so on. And not as many actually think about, you know, what their relationship is with what they're seeing and what they're trying to say about it and what their point of view is. So, I think that's where we all need practice, because we all need to think about, like, why am I doing this? What, you know, 10 people can come and photograph the same building or the same street or the same person, and they'll all be telling a different story with the image. And it's interesting to ask yourself why, and also just the difference between, obviously, the process of filmmaking, where it's all about how the images relate to each other. So each individual image doesn't necessarily have to, it has meaning, obviously, but the real meaning is in how they're juxtaposed with each other. Whereas when you're taking a photo, then you're really focused on, like, what meaning does this image have? What am I saying with it? What does the person get from it? So you're thinking about different things. It's a different thought process, but they're both very important, and they're both really interesting to think about on your own. You know, when I go for walks on my own, and also when I interact with other people, it's always interesting to think about those things.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You also mentioned about, like, taking walks. It's funny. It's interesting that across most of the creative, for example, I know a lot of writers and music visual artists. I do it too. I actually get quite inspired by just taking a walk around somewhere. Texture, light, shape, sound, those things really, it really moves. Yeah, it really shapes where one wants to look. I just find that interesting. The fact that it's such a universal thing, and nobody has actually thought that. It's like the artist just knows that in order to you should go out. But let's just take it back. Like you're talking about your documentary, my brother. Tell us a little bit about that. You say you're working on a current project that you guys worked on before COVID. I think I read that on your page some time ago, actually. Yeah, tell us about the project, man. And I mean, if you were shooting it before COVID, that's like 3 years ago. So it's been a while. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about
it was a while. So basically, I wanted to do, I'm fascinated by cities, and I look at cities as being these almost as personalities, and these kind of organisms that have, in some senses, all cities are the same. People always say, big cities are always the same, but we know very well that they're not. And we all know very well that we connect with certain cities more than with others, and so on.
Yeah, man.
So I was always fascinated by that, and the fact, I grew up in Australia, but I've been living and working on this continent for 2 decades now, in different places, and I always wanted. I survived as a freelancer and did different types of work, but I always had this idea to make these epic films that would just investigate an African city and look at what's happening in that city and how it operates and what makes it tick and so on. And of course, I carried this idea for years and nobody ever wanted to fund it or give me money for it. And then eventually when a bunch of things happened and I got, very frustrated with the whole process of, pitching ideas to clients and not really having a voice as a filmmaker, even though this is what I've been trying to, I like everyone, like you, so I compare it to like if you work as a chef and you never actually, you never have the opportunity to make your own recipe. You're always making somebody else's recipe. You don't know if yours is any good or not,
Yeah.
So, so I started making this film independently, in Johannesburg, about Johannesburg. And it was my way of getting to know the city. And I started it before COVID. Initially, it was just me on my own, catching taxis, going to different parts of the city and so on. And I kind of figured, to make a long story short, people did become interested in the project. And now I have, a team of people working with me and so on. And it's grown a lot. And people in Joburg kind of, a lot of people know the project and they see us around town, and it was interrupted by COVID, of course. So what happened just before COVID started, I went to Australia. It was supposed to be a visit. I wasn't planning to stay there very long. And then of course the border closed and everything closed, and I was there for 2 years. I was on it. The project was on ice. But I continued, in a way it was a huge luxury, because how often when you do a creative project, do you get to like have a break and think about it for 2 years? Right, and watch every frame that you filmed and have deep discussions online with collaborators and go deeper with it, and then come back after 2 years with like a whole new thinking, a whole new energy, and a whole new sort of approach, and all the stuff that we've all learned over that time, and hopefully grown as human beings and so on. So So after COVID, so 2022, I came back to continue the project, and then had a bit of a break from it, to, basically come back now. Now I'm in the final phase. So what I'm doing now, I've just come back to Joburg. We're doing the final phase of filming. And after that, hopefully, it'll be ready to edit and release. But the film is about Johannesburg.
Yeah, I was going to ask,
sort of the epic story of the city.
What's the film about?
It's my take on the city. So my plan is to make other films about other African cities that that I've lived in and worked in and so on. And I guess each one I have to think about, what is my take on this place? What is my relationship with this place? And so at the same time, the film obviously is not about me, it's about the city. But the process of making it is about how I interact with, obviously, with all the people that I meet and the places and what I think the place of this city is now globally, which I think is really major. I think Johannesburg is going through a golden age right now creatively, and people don't really know about it.
That's actually quite interesting. When you say what I'd like to sort of quiz you on, you say that sort of making a city about making a film about cities you stayed in across the Joburg is a very unique place. We all know that it has the CBD is quite a vibrant. It's quite a busy place, and I guess it's got its own texture, its own sound. It's very very unique. And it's also a pretty. I've got robbed well over 7 times, maybe even closer to 8 over there. But the irony behind that is I still never felt, besides being a victim of crime, I've still never felt scared of it. In fact, quite the opposite. It's weird. I sort of embraced it, not the crime, but the vibe, the vibe, the energy, and the color as well. So I guess from a technical, what are the elements about the other city that really stood out? Is it the architecture? Is it the people? Is it the color? Is it the layout of the? And are you talking about Johannesburg? Are you talking specifically the CBD, or are you talking how?
No. I'm talking. I mean, look. I see like Greater Johannesburg. I see the whole of Gauteng pretty much as being one big city.
Yeah.
In the way that if you talk about New York, you're basically talking about the tri-state area, including, New Jersey and all of these things, right? I mean, Pretoria is essentially a suburb of Joburg now. Like for all intents and purposes. I mean, you can enjoy this whole big agglomeration. You can enjoy the whole thing as one big city, essentially. Yeah. You can use it in that way. And of course, different parts of it have different histories and different identities. But I mean, I think the thing is the history, the environment, the mix of communities, all of these things. I mean, the story of a city is the interrelationship between all of those.
Sure.
So Johannesburg has a very different. I mean, you can go to Cape Town and see very similar sort of architecture, but we know very well that the vibe of the city is very different. And how do you have a conversation? Like, how do you zero in on what the essence of that is? That becomes the story. Like what is it about that? And Johannesburg is sort of fascinating in that sense because it is a new city. Like I can compare it just having been to Cairo, which is, literally the oldest metropolis on the planet, that's still functioning. So it's obviously going to have a very different feel about it, just apart from anything else, right? Just even that aspect of it, that Johannesburg is very much a city of migrants, and it is very much a city where you can fit in very easily without changing who you are, because everybody is coming from a different place and nobody expects you. It's like nobody says, no, in order to fit in, you have to be like us, because who is us? Yeah. Who is us in Johannesburg, right? Yeah. Which of the numerous cultures is it? And that's the beautiful thing about Joburg, is it actually gives people this incredible freedom to transcend their, whatever their, I mean, obviously people come with their own traumas and their own experiences and their own prejudices and whatever they come with. But Joburg does give you an opportunity, if you want that opportunity, to kind of overcome those things and Absolutely. Kind of, and kind of create your own tribe almost, in a sense, which I think what everyone here is doing to some degree.
Absolutely. I kind of just want to add on that, just to reiterate what you were saying. Absolutely. Like as an artist, I struggled to sit when I decided to want to do for a living and so on and so on. I went about all over the country. I didn't fit in anywhere. Johannesburg was the only place that didn't ask me where I'm from. It didn't question my accent. It didn't anything. They just looked at my and I say they, it's the people that live there, because back then Newtown was still popping. I just went there with my bag of art, and people just liked my art, and then from there it grew, and they just accepted me, and that thing still resonates with me today. And they say you never know what when it's gone or some shit like that, but like when I know how strong it was when I left Johannesburg, I'm like, oh shit, but like it was really, really, really that strong. And also the entrepreneur vibe there, I thought was, if you look at South Africa, it's a lot of artists are pretty entrepreneurial, and it's also capitalism is not, it's frowned on, but like it's also embraced. I always thought that it's just an interesting narrative about the city. You were saying there about, I like what you're saying. You're saying that Gauteng can be seen as like basically one huge, like, like Pretoria can be a suburb of Joburg. I'm sure there's probably one of the people from Pretoria that don't agree. But I get it. Like if you look at Centurion, Midrand, it's it's Joburg. It's just
Absolutely.
yeah, man.
And the thing is, sorry, just you mentioned getting robbed 7 times. I mean, I've been in and out of the city now since 2006, and I've been robbed once. I've also been robbed in London. I've been robbed in a bunch of other places. I think that, I don't think that people always want to talk about crime in Johannesburg, and we can't ignore it. It's you can't just say, oh no, it's a myth and everything's fine. I mean, obviously it's a high crime city. But I think that the fact that it's the first thing that everybody mentions, whereas there's other cities that have a much higher crime rate, like Mexico City or Rio de Janeiro, and people focus on, if you say I'm going on holidays to Brazil, the first thing people are going to talk about is, oh wow, the food, the music, the culture. You know what I mean? It's not whereas Johannesburg is like, oh my God, the crime. And the thing is that people don't realize that since the end of apartheid, this is statistics. It's not, didn't make this up. Since the end of apartheid, since 1994, the murder rate in Gauteng province has decreased by more than 50%. And these are statistics that you can look up. So the thing is that yes, of course, it sucks to get robbed, right? I mean, it's terrible and it's traumatic and so on. And none of us like it. And we all wish that we could have a city where we could freely walk 24/7 in the streets. But the fact of the matter is that we are living through a period of history, and we have to accept that there's a history that has created these things. And rather than complain about them and run away from them, for me, it's more interesting to see, like, how can we, as this random mix of people that's ended up in the city, how can we work towards making it something that works for everyone who lives here?
Let me
because it wasn't designed. Sorry, go
on. Okay, we can talk about the design element, which is something I actually wanna get into, especially the that has been gentrified as well. You're saying I'm actually aware of the fact that there's other cities across the world which the crime is much higher. You say like in Mexico City. Do you think there's a racial element? Do you think there's a racial element in that like Johannesburg being a black city, that like too many loud crazy blacks and they'll just rob you and shit like that? What's your
No, I mean, look, I mean, the racial element, in as much as everything in South Africa is heavily racialized, because people have been conditioned to look at this one organ of our body, the skin, as being of primary importance for some bizarre reason, right? As opposed to like any other organ, like your kidney or your liver or whatever, for some reason, right? Like, and this, again, this is like historical. Like, it's not everywhere. You go to Mozambique and they don't have that obsession with skin color like people do in South Africa. It's very different. I mean, in South Africa, race still in people's minds defines your identity. People will still kind of say, that an Indian guy came into the room, and the fact that that person is of Indian background has no relevance to the story, right? It's not important. But people will still say that.
Yeah, you're right.
People will still say that because it takes a long time to undo that shit, right? I mean, it takes a long time to kind of think like, okay, I can't draw any conclusions about you based on just seeing the color of your skin. You could be anything at all. And just by looking at you, I can't make any assessment of what you are. But that takes a long time to undo that, because that was done deliberately, and it was introduced deliberately, and people were taught to do this in a very scientific and sort of toxic manner. So yes, of course, I mean, there's the correlation in Johannesburg and South Africa between wealth and race. Like, yes, it exists due to historical, we all know this. yes, it's changing. It's not changing fast enough. Yes, it's changing. But I mean, I don't think like, I don't know. I mean, I think that obviously, ultimately, people's even poverty doesn't necessarily equate with crime. I mean, it sometimes does, but not necessarily. I mean, you can be in very poor communities and they're not. It's not dangerous at all. People mistake. I mean, in fact, it's the opposite. In fact, people have sometimes, people are watching what's going on in their community and they want their community to be safe and they want visitors to come there and they don't want people to feel scared. So there's this kind of like thing where everybody's watching what, I mean, Joburg CBD, yes, Joburg CBD has been dangerous, I guess, because it's becoming less dangerous now because it's becoming more residential. So people think of it as home. The minute people live there and think of it as home, all of a sudden, large chunks of Joburg CBD are now like much safer than they were, and you can walk around even at night and so on, in places like Marshalltown and etc. And it's because once people move in and live there, they feel that this is now their home and they have a stake in this place. And they're not treating it. And they're not treating.
Point. Yeah. Once people feel they have a stake in something, then they look after it more. They'll clean. They'll make sure the street is clean. They'll make sure that there's nobody on the corner. So I agree with you there.
Totally, and I think Johannesburg does have this history of people not thinking of it as their home. People just thinking of it as this place that you come and rape and take
and get out
whatever you can, and then get the fuck out as quickly as possible and go somewhere else. And now you're seeing people, that mentality is changing, and you're seeing people who do think of this place and the neighborhoods as their home, and even moving here from other places and making it their home, whether it's from Cape Town or other countries or other parts of the, KwaZulu-Natal or whatever. And so now they're building a community. Now they're not thinking like, okay, as soon as I have enough money, I'm out of here. And then that changes everything, and this is what we're seeing happening right now. And because it's a work in progress, we're not seeing the fruits of it yet. So people often just kind of look at things and go, oh, it's all getting worse. But the fact of the matter is that, we're living through that process of this change. So it's not going to be, things aren't going to be clean and neat and tidy and, all neatly packaged for the consumer, they're messy and people are working it out. And that's the, in a sense, that's the fun part of it.
Fun part of it. That's also a nice way of saying I was rephrasing it.
Sure.
Because you raised some very interesting points here, man. Like the first thing, just before we're talking about the crime element, you made mention of the fact that the design of the city, the louder city, and changing, and that it is. Maboneng is a good example. In the early 2000s, Newtown was sort of the flagpole, the right word, to say like, or when gentrifying started, a Newtown went really up. 10 years. It was just about 10 years, and after they built that mall, it sucked the life out of. And then everything went more towards the east, Maboneng, and that whole Marshall from anyway. The designing of or rather, what I want to get is your experiences on. It is becoming a lot more residential for sure, lots more lofts, and there's a lot of high-end people staying there as well. And they're also redoing, for example, like the downtown music studios. They redid that whole section there. So they sort of kind of keeping some of the history, I'm actually quite critical of gentrification. I did a solo exhibition in 2018 where I focused just on Maboneng. At that time it was still busy growing. I'm actually quite critical of it, and it'll be interesting to get your views, since you are much more well traveled and seen it in other parts of the world. What makes gentrification in Johannesburg different? Because let me just give you my views. I'm actually the Newtown, I'm gonna call it the Newtown experiment because it didn't last long. I thought because when I just landed in the early 2000s, every creative who's probably a mover and shaker today operated out of there in the early 2000s in some capacity, and fun enough, there was a type of a sense of a community. You could walk from Kippies to Artist Proof. I was at Artist Proof Studios, and you could walk around. You get everybody, actors, musicians, everybody, and that sense of community made us feel. I'm talking us as a creative community. It made us feel safe. There was this thing at the back of the market theater. We used to go there and go and smoke. Basically the whole day, but I would, and there'll always be a very the vibe with the energy was always there because there'll be like actors, musicians, and so forth, and it was just. And my understanding is that I don't know if they really want to purposely shut that down, but that did eventually get closed when they started building that damn mall, and it sucked the life out of it. And if you go to the market theater now, I mean back then they had that market outside the market theater, which was vibrant and all this. Now, if you look at Maboneng, it's way more sanitized. It's also very Western. I don't really get a strong sense of something which is unique to Joburg. For example, like with the old horror cafe, there was actually a sound coming. A lot of the bands that used to jam, they had a specific sound, bro. I don't get that with Maboneng. I don't. In fact,
when were you last in Maboneng? How long ago?
COVID. I was staying just around the corner from Maboneng up until COVID hit. When COVID hit, I mean, I'm an artist. My bottom line got really serious where I just couldn't afford it anymore. So yeah, I was in Maboneng for about 3 years. Yeah, give and take. And like I said, man, I never really got. Yeah, there was a few places there which really had, like I would say, and a sort of an African identity, especially in their name. But Newtown had what they managed to do there was, I guess it was just more because if you must look at like at the poetry, because I was publishing books at the time. I was a publisher, and I because I go back now with COVID, I went back and I had a look at all the stuff that we did past then. It was a lot more happier. People were a lot more positive. I mean, sure, that's a lot to do with the social political situation as well. But I just think it got worse. So it'll be cool to hear your views on all of that.
No, look, I mean, the thing is, I have a problem with gentrification as well, but I think that the gentrification that happens in a lot of other cities is that you have areas that were considered undesirable. For example, in Sydney, where I grew up, for a long time, it was considered undesirable to live in old houses. It was considered, why would you want to live in an old house? And then fashions changed, and all the old buildings from like the 19th century were all renovated and became super expensive, and the people who were living in them were basically pushed out of the neighborhood because they couldn't afford it anymore. So that kind of gentrification. So an area that had been a very working class area suddenly has become middle class, and the people who've been living there now have to live somewhere like on the edge of town, like somewhere far away, and they can no longer enjoy, the lifestyle that they had, being connected to everything, the community that they built. That's all kind of destroyed. The thing that's happening in Johannesburg has been largely in the CBD, where the buildings were not residential to begin with. So there was obviously a problem with the fact that when the businesses from Joburg CBD kind of ran away, the buildings became residential, but they became residential essentially in a way that is not how can I say, most people living there were undocumented immigrants, and there was a lot of corruption surrounding that. And I remember my first experience of coming to Johannesburg, 2006, and you'd see like an office building in town, but there's laundry hanging out of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's clearly people living there, but they don't have running water or electricity or anything like that. So I think it's unrealistic to expect the city center of a city to continue like that forever, right? I mean, I think it's unrealistic to expect that. So the question is, how are you going to develop these buildings? First of all, there has to be a system, and this is an ongoing fight, as I understand it, between the Constitutional Court and the various city councils of Johannesburg, where initially there was a very sort of brutal eviction process that was taking place. And the Constitutional Court is constantly trying to stop that because it's unconstitutional, right? You're not allowed to just kick people out of their houses and leave them homeless. So obviously any kind of urban renewal project has to come with a social housing project, that the two have to be combined, right? One with the other.
Interesting,
and, you know, and one thing about Johannesburg that I think we have to appreciate is that the city center is not being redeveloped for wealthy people. It's being redeveloped for people of, you know, essentially like who don't have a lot of income. And to some extent, the things that you don't like aesthetically, like for example, building a mall in Newtown, those are things that working people need. Like they need a supermarket, they need a Mr. Price, they need a pharmacy.
I see.
They need those things there, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, those things are going to happen, right? The mall is going to come because those very people need those amenities. The question is, how can we think about that process? And I've been talking to architects about this as well as part of the film. And a very interesting point that's come out is that no one's really ever thought about, so these communities that live in the inner city of Johannesburg, they're living in these buildings and they're living with those shops because that's how that place has been designed since apartheid days. Yep. No one's really sat down and thought, how do we create spaces that work for these people? And that's actually changing in Joburg, because now you have, for example, Jewel City, which is next to Maboneng, and it's mostly it's essentially low-income housing. The entire place is pedestrianized, so you can have people chilling outside without having to spend money. They can just sit with their friends. You can have skaters and photographers and all sorts of things. And it's a functional neighborhood for people who don't have a high income in the center of the city. And those sorts of things, I think, are examples of Joburg getting it right.
Interesting.
In terms of how, you know, and I think your point about, you know, I remember Newtown very well. When I first came to Joburg, Newtown was the place to be. You know, Horror Cafe, Shivava, all those venues, Sapphire Town and so on, the bookshop. But what I've found in Johannesburg is that this is it's a city of transients. It's a city where people move in and out, they move around a lot. So what happens is, like, if a place closes down, it's not necessarily sad, because those same people have just moved to another part of the city and that vibe has moved somewhere else. So in Joburg, it's not a city where, like, a live music venue can survive for 100 years. You sort of have to follow the vibe around from place to place, right? And then when you get into that mindset, when you realize that, when you kind of get that dynamic, then it's not like something's closed and you're like, oh, well, we're just going to have to live without it. It's like, no, okay, that place is closed, but now it's all happening over there. So, you know, Newtown, then everything, you know, things moved to Braamfontein and Maboneng. Now all the art galleries are in Rosebank. Sandton is becoming sort of urbanized. It's no longer what it was, because the new sort of CBD in Joburg is Rosebank, right? Everybody wants to be in Rosebank. So Sandton is becoming sort of strangely, like it's becoming more urban. It's becoming more in a city, more residential in pockets, and Sandton is changing as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and that to me, that's something that's part of the DNA of Johannesburg. It's part of the nature of the city, that you can go away for 3 months and you come back and everything's changed
yeah,
like very quickly.
yeah, yeah,
And you
yeah.
kind
No,
of
no,
go,
that's
okay,
true.
that thing used to be there now, and now we go
Now it's
there.
somewhere
Okay,
else.
fine. You just
Yeah.
got to get your bearings, and and next year it's going to be something else again.
Interesting, interesting. I never
So
looked at it like that.
that's how I see it.
Interesting, interesting. In that's super interesting. And I agree with the fact now that you now you explain the thing behind the mall, it kind of makes sense because there's block of flats all over. Really. And I remember in the early 2000s when I was staying in Bram, yeah, food places was a proper food place was you had to go far for that, and it was always crowded,
Yeah.
and the quality of the food wasn't always that great either. Interesting. One thing one of the one of the things about gentrification that never really sat with me is how they take how they use street art and visual or artists in general sort of to make the place trendy, and as soon as it becomes because if you remember what Maboneng, it was first arts on Main, it was very niche, it was very, David Kirk was there, there was a few other very flashy, fancy galleries there that are very unique. And as soon as I started to blow out, I guess the attention, a lot of artists, like you said, the galleries all moved to Rosebank Center, moved. So when I did that exhibition, I was coming in from that angle, and I've also noticed with Maboneng that it also trying to craft his own identity through like the street culture, for example, like African icons carried in there in the one corner. So yeah, and I also get what you're saying with Julius, that the guy can walking in and out. Yeah, it makes sense. So if I must bring that back to your documentary, are you talking about those about all these elements? Are you following?
Yeah, definitely.
What,
These are the things I'm trying.
yeah, what, how, or rather, how are you following it?
Look, I mean, hopefully towards the end of the year you'll be able to see it. So,
For sure.
but I definitely, I mean, this is what I've been trying to sort of unravel how the city works and talk to different people about, this whole process of people in Johannesburg actually figuring out how to love and enjoy their city for the first time, because you always have to come back to this thing is that Johannesburg was not built and designed as a city that's meant to work for all the people that live in it.
100%.
Right? It was quite a brutal, toxic place, right?
100%.
And nobody loved the city, including the people that built it. They just built it because they needed to establish their own power over this gold that they found, right? They didn't have any love for the place. And so actually seeing people now who love this city, it's actually a very historic moment that we're living through. And
that's super interesting. I never put it like that. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah. And so you have people in Johannesburg just in the last few years, it's a very new thing. People who have just kind of treated it as like, okay, this is where I live and I shop at the mall and this is my life. Now they're like, wait a second, there's all this other stuff that's happening that I could actually be enjoying. Let me go and discover it. And that's a very fascinating process that we're seeing right now. And I think that there is this idea, and of course there's a lot of obstacles because ultimately, capitalism and so on. So there's obstacles, but at the same time, it's very interesting to see how people are focusing on, developing a sense of community and actually kind of like appreciating what's unique about the city. And that's why I say that it is going through a very historic period right now. It's a bit hard to define it because we're in the middle of it, but it's really exciting to see it unfold and capture that.
Do you think what role do you think COVID-19 has played in the social side of, or rather in developing of the city? Because I did as soon as the hard lockdown hit, right, I got out, right. There was no way I was going to stay, and my reason was it's small, it's cramped. My building was kind of loud. I couldn't, quiet. That wasn't an option. And the other main issue was I just wasn't comfortable with everybody literally being locked up. I just thought something was going to happen. And how according to you say you've been back to you were in Sydney in the hard lockdown. How do you think COVID has played any in people's movement, especially?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I mean, of course, I wasn't here for that period, right?
Yeah,
as
but
I
I'm
mentioned,
talking
but I've seen, yeah, exactly. I think there's a couple of things. I think first of all, we've become very much aware. If well, how can I say? I think a lot of people were already aware, but even more aware of the problem of like this huge inequality of this city and of this country, because it's all very well to tell everybody, okay, it's lockdown, but it's one thing to be in lockdown when you have a nice house in the suburbs where you can chill in your garden and sit in your swimming pool, and it's another thing to be in lockdown when you've got like a family of hundreds of people and everyone's like, you know what I mean, like good luck, trying to get these people to. So and just this idea of like, okay, what is the role? I mean, like this is an emergency situation. We don't know what this virus is going to be. We have no idea. Remember at the beginning, we had no idea what it was, right? I mean, we just thought, okay, everybody might die. Like we didn't know. So the idea of like the necessity of the government being able to say to people, we're asking you to stay home, but don't worry, like you're going to get money. We're going to pay for your food. We're going to make sure that you don't die, right? That's that kind of the dysfunctionality of our system in not being able to deal with that kind of emergency. And when I say our system, I don't mean South Africa, I mean the world, right? I mean the whole world of like, okay, we weren't prepared for anything like this, So I think that it highlighted the deep inequality of this country and of Johannesburg, and also highlighted the fact that this is a problem that we really need to address. Like, it's not something that's just going to get better with time, right? It doesn't work like that. I think that's one issue. And the other thing that I can say is that coming back after COVID, or rather after the lockdown period, not after COVID is still around, but after that whole thing, after the whole kind of period of intense lockdown and intense restrictions and so on, I'm just finding that people here are really aware of the fact that we've lost a lot of time, and they are ready to go, and they're ready to hustle, and they're ready to create. And I've just found the atmosphere in Johannesburg to be incredibly exciting since getting back, and just people's energy and people's willingness to make things happen, is palpable. So that's something that I'm very excited about.
Are you covering that in the documentary as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, we have obviously footage from before COVID and after COVID, and all the businesses that didn't survive and closed, and entire streets that were like a row of empty shops and all this sort of stuff. So it hit hard. But I think that just the energy of this place and the sort of the ambition that people have, in a good way.
Yeah, no, I can second you on that. The energy is definitely something. And I totally hear you with that. With like after, and I can actually talk on behalf, not behalf, but like I'm talking from this platform. A lot of artists during that hard lockdown was sitting and conceptualizing. Was looking at where they want to go and how something is opened up. People are moving. There's a lot of writers are being published books. A lot of visual artists doing solo shows. A lot of music and so forth and so forth. And I like it. It's interesting how you say that, and you said it now a few times that we living in sort of like a golden age type of with a it's interesting. That's also one of the things of having like some. I'm saying it from outside because looking in from outside from the city how they are there, how they look at that. Very very interesting. Yeah, just a few more things on the documentary. What's the title of it? What's the title? What's it called?
So the title is Positive Anomaly, which is a
that's quite
it's actually
that's a very 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 cool name.
So Positive Anomaly is it's actually a term in geology, and it refers to like a very unusual concentration of metals, of minerals. So if geologists talk about a positive anomaly, so but it's also, I mean, so it kind of comes from that, like this Johannesburg being the largest, positive, but also just the fact that to me, the city's an anomaly in so many ways. I mean, the fact that a city built on heavy metals, and with its toxic history and everything, the fact that it is what it is today is quite an anomaly to me. So the subtitle, that's the title, is Positive Anomaly, and the subtitle is Making History in Johannesburg, because I kind of feel that people come to Johannesburg with this ambition to make history and to really make a difference.
Everybody wants to go there.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to find their goal. So I get you.
So that's the full title, is Positive Anomaly, Making History in Johannesburg.
Yeah, man, just explain to my listeners. So what happens, like you guys say you close to the editing phase or stage of the documentary. What happens after that? And I guess, when will it be released and how, just explain to us that process. So if any of the listeners, want to check it out in a few months, how does that?
Yeah.
How is it? So and so forth.
It's all very much still a work in progress. We're, as I said, we're working independently. I'm working with two producers at the moment, and we did make the film. The idea of it was to produce it entirely independently to avoid sort of making it something that ultimately is for a client, which is what tends to happen when you get funding very early in the piece. So already there's all these like limitations on the work before you've even started.
Right.
So we were quite sort of adamant that we would figure out what this film was going to be first before we sought any kind of outside support for it. So we are at the moment working on developing partnerships. Now that we've kind of developed the film to a certain point, now we're developing partnerships with Johannesburg, various partners in Johannesburg, I can say. So so by the time we get to the post-production process, then the idea is that it will all happen much faster than the filming process. And we are aiming to release the film sort of like towards the end of the year. Obviously, it's going to be a feature film, so we'll be submitting it to film festivals and so on. I think there'll be screenings in various cities like Johannesburg and Cape Town, and hopefully other places. There'll be actual sort of, cinema screenings. And I think, like everything else, it'll eventually end up in some form of streaming platform, because that's how people tend to watch, things these days. I mean, that's the thing. Like for me, I'm already developing. I've started working on developing sort of other city films, so the films that will come next after this. Obviously, film generally takes time, even without COVID. Film is like a lengthy process to make a film, and so I'm trying to get the ball rolling on further projects now, so that by the time this is out, hopefully they'll be kind of a bit developed. But definitely, I mean, people can follow. We're posting on Instagram. There's an account for the film, Positive Anomaly Film. I post updates on the project on my Instagram all the time. We will be on all the platforms, but it's just gradually, the closer it gets to release, the more stuff that will be out there that people can follow and find out. But at the moment, if people want to see kind of see what kind of content we're filming and what's going on, they can check out.
Well, I can tell you one thing
on this platform.
What the art Lexcia will do is, I think I've checked out your YouTube channel. I'm sure I did. I'll just go to have a look, and I wrote it down. I know we'll definitely do that, and we'll fund it, because I actually want to ask you this. This is sort of in closing. I did an article last year where they were saying that with the rise of the streaming platforms, that this is sort of the golden age of documentary making. There's documentaries coming out all the time on various things, and you can think, to my understanding, I think streaming platforms is a big deal to that, because they're just monsters for content, more content, and this and that, it grows. What's your take on that? Do you think we are in a golden era of documentary making?
It's a good question. It's hard for me to say, to be honest. I think that the fact that there's a lot of something doesn't always mean that it's the golden age.
Okay,
right.
Good one. Okay, for sure. Okay,
right.
Nice one.
And I think there's a danger that sometimes when, and again, I haven't really thought this through, so I might be completely wrong about this, but I think that when streaming platforms and so on, when they see that there's a market for something like a documentary or whatever, it can actually have a negative effect, because they can see they want to kind of streamline everything and regiment everything to a large degree, because then they kind of start seeing, okay, there's a formula that works.
Yeah.
And so now you have a situation where, like, streaming platforms are actually telling people which cameras they must use, and kind of dictating things that should be like your creative choice as a filmmaker, right? Because they want everything streamlined. They want everything, and so this is a danger. And I think that we've always there's always been a situation, because film, even though documentaries cost less than obviously making feature films, but it's still one of the most expensive art forms, that is out there. And so there is just this tendency to create an industry out of it, like a conveyor belt sort of industry out of it, that produces product, and that's always a struggle, for anyone, whether it's in the Hollywood system or the current streaming platform system that exists. There's always this, what do you do if you are independent, if you want to do things differently? You're basically told, no, this is how it's supposed to be. So I think that's always that problem never goes away. The problem of what do you do if you want to do something that's not if you want to if the product that you want to produce doesn't fit within those guidelines. Where do you fit, and how do you do it, and who's going to support you, and how? I mean, I think now we're in this era as well, when just content, as opposed to like
quality,
a film, like content itself has value, and so we're put in this situation where we kind of think like, okay, if we're making a film that's not intended to be a commercial film, then we have to figure out all this alternative ways of monetizing the content and what to do with it in order for people to actually survive from doing this. Like, how do you make this sustainable?
I've seen that in and I'll give you an example like of Netflix. A lot of the more recent movies are predictable. The scripts is poorly written. It's they just put some 5-star or these high-end actors, hoping that the name of the actor will sell the show. Watch the show. It's actually it's a poor film. It's a poor that is predictable. And I definitely can relate that to the streaming platform because it's this monster for content, the more content. And I see your point with regards to documentary making. Just my last point on documentary making, and I'd like your opinion on this. I think it was actually last year or 2 years ago with that R. Kelly documentary, something R. Kelly with his and I don't want to comment on the actual documentaries. It's more on what it did. They put. I watched it. I didn't think it was a very. It also just looked like it was put together real quick. If I was just look at production and so forth, the technical things, and they had a serious agenda. They went after some dude and they got it right. Do you think that documentary makers? I don't want to say being weaponized, but do you think there is an element of that? Because, like you say, it's becoming quite formulated, and I've noticed that. So, in order to sell it, or in order to sell the product, you just choose, let's go after this one. For example, now in South Africa, we have all this load shedding crisis. I can totally see a bunch of documentaries being very sensationalist about all the shit around, all the politics. Yeah, what's your take on that?
I think it's like anything. I think it's just, people think about different things, and some people are just thinking about, how do I mean, the majority of content that's made out there, the majority of documentary films, whatever, and for that matter, feature films and TV shows, I mean, they're essentially created to please advertisers because they're chasing advertising money. And so the people creating that content, they're not waking up every morning and they're not thinking, what am I trying to say, and what is what impact is this going to have, and what how do we engage with communities, and how do we use this thing that we're making in order to promote change or whatever. They're not thinking about those things, not because they're not intelligent or they're whatever, but simply because they're working for a client and they have to deliver a product. And so I don't blame them, in as much as, like, if I work for a client, like I do work for clients, and obviously if someone is paying you money to do something, then you have to deliver what they want. I mean, that's just the nature of the thing. And I don't have a problem with that. If I work for a client, I mean, obviously, like, I'm not going to work for a client if I think that, they're doing something completely immoral, and, I'm going to be embarrassed to be associated with them. I mean, you make that choice, but once you agree to work for a client and make something, then they've got a vision and you've got to make that vision live. And that's all there is to it. And their needs are the ones that are important here, whether their needs are to keep the advertisers happy or whatever it happens to be, which is fine. I don't have a problem with this, and I don't blame a lot of very talented people, and everybody, has to survive in the system. Like, I don't blame people for that. But I think that we just need to create platforms, and we need to create spaces for other things besides that.
Sure. Yeah, man. Yeah.
And and the thing is, like when you're making a film, the people just immediately ask you all these questions about, the funding behind it. Like, they don't ask you those questions if you're writing a book, right? They don't ask you like how many minutes is it. Like, the first question is, how many minutes is it going to be? Like, who's funding it? They don't ask. If you're writing a book, the first question isn't who's funding it and how many pages is it going to be. It's going to be as many pages as it needs to be, right? Like, that's like, but we're so conditioned. It's like a Stockholm syndrome, you know. We're so conditioned by the industry that we kind of assume that their demands are actually the way that things have to be.
That's a very, very, very good point.
All right. So we need to have alternative platforms for things that are just designed to be, you know, that are not that haven't been dictated to by the client. And it's not a question of like, oh, you know, I'm such a purist and I can't, you know, I have to, you know, it's not even about that, right? It's just about that, you know, I really think that one of the jobs of artists in any medium is to set the agenda in terms of the conversation that's happening in the society, not to follow the conversation, but to actually identify what the conversation should be and push it in a certain direction. I really believe that. I think that if you take that role away from artists, you're basically stripping them of the main thing that they're meant to be doing.
I agree with you there.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes it makes complete sense. You know, it's a real echo chamber because I was going to say everything you were saying. Like I agree with you there 100%. Eugene Ulman, this was a fantastic conversation. Positive Anomaly, guys, look forward to that. We'll definitely. I think what we will do. Because we're trying to switch things up here and make the platform a bit more interactive. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll try to not try. I think we'll feature because we want to preview more shows. We're actually trying to cover more live music, poetry shows, and so forth. Book fairs, art fairs, etc. And we definitely want to make more interactive. We'll definitely speak about this. I'll definitely share it on our pages as well. It just makes me. I really miss job work. I miss it. I miss it to death. I'll be very interested to see how you seeing it. That's always very interesting to see a place that you're familiar with through the views of another creative. I think that's one of the beauties of art. I just love it to death. To all the listeners, remember guys, like, subscribe, and comment to this channel. Siza will definitely be with us in the next episode. Like I told you, Gene, we're trying to switch it up here and trying to do a bit more interactive things. So look forward to that. Lots of more new content. Eugene, just to like close it fully. As much as I'm a podcast and a visual artist, I'm also an entrepreneur, and we're actually busy developing a platform, an app. And the idea is I was actually talking to my developers yesterday. We're starting off with an e-store. We'll just be selling art, but I don't want to give too much away right now. But we are what I've been doing on this platform is talking to people like yourself, and all these things you're saying is super interesting. So we write it down and we try to conceptualize and put it in an actual working app. And I've got a group of guys that's actually doing that for me as we speak. So it's also a work in progress. So because the point that you made there that we need alternative platforms, that's something we've recognized, and we actually working on it as we speak. I think I agree with you there 100%. And also just another point on that, it's access. We also want to make art more accessible to people, and want to do it through their phone, through their phones. They can access, everything on the phone. You can have your full experience, your art experience on that. So I'll definitely keep you up to speed with that, because I'm going to be needing, we'll be sending out links just to have an app being tested out by various people and so forth. And I'll keep you up to speed with that for sure. My brother, this was fantastic. Just in closing, if anybody, you gave out your Twitter, your Instagram handles, are those the only, is there a website as well or something else, another way that people can get hold of it?
Man, there's going to be a website that there's nothing, it's in progress at the moment. Okay. So right now we like Positive Anomaly Film is the Instagram feed, Positive Anomaly Film on YouTube, Twitter as well. There's a positive, so basically there's that, and there's me. And I'm just my name, Eugene Ulman. Like I'm easy to find.
My brother, we actually pretty much ran out of time. Thanks for coming through.
Thank you very much. Great to speak with you, and yeah, look forward to the next time.
Yes, man. I'll be in touch with you via WhatsApp or Facebook with regards to the episode will come out. Till then, take care, my brother. And talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right.
One love.
Thanks, Wesley.